So I am head of rare disease at LifeArc, which might not be an organisation that you've heard of, so I'll begin by telling you a little bit about who we are. So we're a self-financing medical research charity that just does translation. So we just focus our efforts on getting research out of the academic lab and on its journey towards patients, and to get things from where they are in the academic space to their next inflection point where someone else is prepared to take them forward through development into market. So a lot of flexing between that academic space and the commercial space, which obviously drug repurposing has some challenges for. And we do that in 3 ways. So we offer a lot of advice around translation. We run technology transfer services on behalf of the UK's Medical Research Council and on behalf of other medical research charities. So we do a lot of work around helping people to protect their IP, manage their IP, develop strategies for that, and think about how things can flow through that pathway from discovery science all the way through to market access. We have our own labs that do largely antibody drug discovery and small molecule drug discovery work, and that is the place where our revenue streams come from. So we have been involved in development of a number of now licensed drugs that pharma have taken to market, the biggest of which is a drug called Catriona that's marketed by Merck, but it was one of the biggest grossing drugs on the market a couple of years ago. So that's where our funding comes from. And that is what allows me then to give away money without having to worry too much about any return. We don't have any shareholders that we're beholden to. We have flexibility in how we have to abide by charity law, but we have a lot of flexibility in what we do, and we don't have to worry too much about getting any financial return back into the charity, because other bits of our charity hopefully take care of that. So there are a number of funding schemes, and where we have focused our efforts in recent years around funding is in really underserved areas. And I am head of the rare disease space, which I'm sure I don't need to tell this audience is an area that is definitely underserved and in need of particular work. But we do also have a venture fund that focus on getting companies started up, and they do invest for a for-profit motive and in securing some revenue stream back into the organisation. So drug repurposing was something that has come up a lot in our funding streams and in the partners that we work with in the advice space. We had a space where we had a lot of other medical research charities were coming to us where they had funded clinical trials, and the academics had published the results of those, but it just wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for those patients to be able to get access to those drugs. The drugs weren't on anyone's label, so you couldn't get them prescribed. People were fighting with their clinicians and waving papers at them, but it just wasn't a good enough situation. So we did a bit of a workshop on that. We brought a lot of people in the UK together to discuss the topic and kind of explore more about why we had such a problem with drug repurposing. Because, and I don't need to tell this audience, there's huge potential with a drug that has a known tox profile. You should be able to expedite that to patient impact much more quickly. But the reality was we just weren't seeing that happening in anger. So back in 2021, we held a workshop and we put out a report, which you can see on our website if you are interested in downloading it. I have a couple of hard copies still with me. If anyone is interested, you can grab me later. But that really just brought home all of the problems. And it really brought out, and I think we've heard some of them today, that getting a drug repurposed is actually really hard. You think on the surface it should be easy, but actually it's really hard. And there's a whole load of problems that you're going to come up against along the way. So at that point, we decided that we needed to put together a bit of a toolkit, similar to the previous presentation, just to bring everything together in one place and try and help mainly charity funders, but also academics who are trying to embark on a drug repurposing journey. It's not meant to give you the answer of you can do A, B, C, and D and you're going to get a repurposed drug, because it's not that easy. But what we wanted to do was to at least help people to go into this process with their eyes open and do that kind of checkbox that was talked about a second ago of here are all of the things that you need to understand as you embark on your drug repurposing journey. And to provide some advice for funders particularly on what they should be looking for when they're looking at reviewing a drug repurposing grant. So this is the toolkit that we've put together. We partnered with the UK's Medical Research Council, who also fund an awful lot of drug repurposing projects, such as the one that Tim presented earlier. And also see their academics really struggling through this journey. And we had a huge amount of support in pulling all of this information together from the UK regulators and from the British Generics Manufacturers Association and Rosie and her team at the NHS, really to help us to bring as much information and as many tools and hints and tips and resources together in one place to help people navigate their way through. The website address is there if anyone is interested in taking a look and wants to dip into it. I think there are a number of case studies on there, I think also including Tim's. So as a charity, where are we going from here in terms of drug repurposing? So we have a standing grant funding panel called the PHIL Fund, which supports rare disease, translational research, and will support drug repurposing projects. We have a number of drug repurposing projects that have been funded through that scheme. It has an annual budget of 5 million a year, so obviously there's a slight limit to the number of clinical studies we can get through with that sort of budget, but we want to support as much as we can through that scheme. We have a number of translational challenges, as I mentioned. I head up the Rare Disease Translational Challenge, and each of the other translational challenges is also looking at how drug repurposing might work in their condition. So chronic respiratory infection and MND are two other areas of focus for us as a charity. And they have both run drug repurposing calls. The chronic respiratory infection one has now closed, and they are delivering that money and hopefully have studies ongoing. We in the rare disease space have just done one in epidermolysis bullosa, which we are making funding decisions on very soon. But the MND Translational Challenge has a call that is still open for expressions of interest at the moment. And if you want to know more about that, I'm going to point you at my colleague James, who's going to wave at you now. And he can talk you through that in a bit more detail. And at the moment, we're very much thinking about where we go longer term as a charity, and where we focus our efforts to make as much impact as possible to benefit patients. And a lot of that is around supporting the whole ecosystem. So how do we help get more research out of academia on its journey towards patients, and what support is needed to really drive that through. And this is an initiative we're calling the Centre for Translation. So we're really thinking about how that might influence the UK's ecosystem in general. And at the moment, we have just brought in Steve, who is now going to wave at you. And he's going to be working with us over the next few months to really scope out where are the gaps. There is a lot of, I'm sure over the last day and today, there's a lot of other different initiatives going on across the globe in drug repurposing, and we haven't got the resources to compete with any of that. But what can we do to help plug any gaps that still exist in the system and to bring the learnings that are happening in other jurisdictions around the world and bring them into the UK, and how can we use that knowledge to help UK academics. So obviously we're really delighted to be working with Remedy for All to try and understand how we can support the activities of Remedy for All, but also how that might help us to bring their learnings back into the UK and support delivery of that more widely. So, yeah, I would just like to end by saying, you know, we're really open to hearing where you think, if you think there is a critical need that isn't being addressed, then please do come and talk to myself or to Steve. We'd be really interested to explore that with you in more detail and think about what resources we need to put in place to really help drive more drug repurposing, particularly for the rare diseases, with my hat on, but you know, potentially for other things also. So I will end there and just say thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak.